welcome back to the Comics Multiverse. My name is Chad, and we're here today to talk about another Kickstarter campaign that's currently funding. It's Don't Tell My Wife I'm a Cult Leader, a dark obsession and rebellious romance ignite in the dawn of the digital age. And with me is creator Todd Steinberg. So let's bring him in, find out about more about him and the book.
All right. Good morning, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Well,
Appreciate it.
thanks for
Yeah, it's
yeah, thanks for stopping by.
a very hot morning here in Texas. Probably might reach another 105 degrees.
Mm.
So just here in my cool little office, just waiting to do this.
Well,
Yeah,
cool. We're in the middle of a break from the heat up here in New York, so it's a it's a
right on.
cloudy and kind of rainy 75-ish. So it's a
All
nice
right.
break.
That is definitely doable. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. Not sure if you're, how many of your listeners remember Waco, 1993? The Branch Davidians, Mount Carmel. David Koresh was their leader. And if you read your history books or if you were there, I know I was watching it in high school on TV when the first flames went up. It was a fiery death
Same.
for most of them. Fiery death for most of them. And then, of course, years of the ATF trying to figure out who to blame, etc. Countless documentaries, countless conspiracy theories, etc. So my story is just like that. But instead of telling a tale of a senseless tragedy, mine is a dark comedy. And unlike David Koresh, who was surrounded by henchmen, child brides, and more guns and ammos than many developing nations, our leader, Floyd, is alone in a bathrobe, one lit cigarette in his mouth, and he's surrounded by a much more patient police squad. And unlike the Branch Davidians, where we know their backstory when those first few flames sparked in April 93, we know absolutely nothing about Floyd. And seemingly, he doesn't really know even who he is or how he ended up in the place that he's in. So he takes a drag off a cigarette, decides he's going to tell his side of events so the world can finally figure out what really happened. And given that time is not on his side, he hastily begins writing down where it all began in Denton, Texas, 1994, 1 year and about 100 miles away from Waco. And we're taken to the advent of a dark day, the advent of the advent of the apocalypse, also known today as the internet, where Floyd reminisces about the time where he spent himself alone in nature, finding himself. But really, as we see the events unfolding in his narrative, he's really just a couch crasher, and he wore out his welcome. He's getting thrown out on his ass, literally nothing to his name and no one to call. And you, as the reader, will find out how he went from an unemployed couch crasher to the anti-hero of the apocalypse, the dawn of the digital age.
Cool. So we'll get more of that here in a bit. But let's take a step back and tell me about your history with comics as a reader and as a creator.
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely wasn't one of those kids who was raised reading Batman and Robin and Superman and all that. My mom gave me every Far Side book as they came out. She loved it. I loved it. That weird, warped sense of humor. Lots of Calvin and Hobbes, lots of Garfield. But I really didn't read any of those serialized comics that a lot of kids grew up knowing and loving. And I was more into my old computer games. I had an Amiga because my mom worked at an Amiga store. So I had free reign on all the video games. And back then, they were slower, they were more immersive despite the graphics, and you got to really feel for all the stories in them. King's Quest, Space Quest, Civilization, and then Amiga had a series called Cinemaware, which was state-of-the-art graphics, Sinbad, Defender of the Crown, SDI, and these really helped inform my youth. But I would say it wasn't until an adult when I started to read graphic novels, and I never really caught on to the superheroes, the fantasies. I was more driven by the more real life ones, the slice of life, even autobiographies and things like that. So it wasn't really until this year I finished Watchmen, just to show you how much of a noob I am with all the classics. But lately I've really enjoyed Craig Thompson, especially Habibi, and then also Glenn Head. I just finished his Chartwell Manor and plan to get, I think, Chicago, which is another one of his memoirs. So that's it in a nutshell. But yeah, TV shows, movies. I liked all the, the Ferris Bueller's, the Goonies, and all the
Mhm.
classics that the kids like. And I don't know if this counts in my favor, but a huge Three Stooges fan growing up and looking back, I kind of see a little bit of Mo in my protagonist Floyd, in the sense that Mo is somewhat abusive. He's uncouth. He's not very effective. But where would Larry and Curly be without him?
Yeah.
So as bad as they would be in a worse spot without Mo. And I thought about that for years. And the movie came out 10, 12 years ago. I don't know if you remember that one. I think it was the Farrelly brothers who did it. But sure enough, they split up where Mo gets on Jersey Shore, and then Larry and Curly are languishing, in their own senseless environment. So I was like, oh, cool. They were thinking the same thing I was thinking.
Mhm. So, what inspired you to make your own comics?
Well, I've always been interested in history, religion, spirituality, and I even took Scientology courses back in the late '90s for about 8 months. Spoiler alert: I don't recommend. If you do go in, if you're curious, go in with an alias. Don't give them your real name or address, because they'll bug you nonstop and so on. And I just thought, man, what if there was like, oh, and I would say the coup de grace was in '97 when the Heaven's Gate cult had their thing where they all
Mhm.
took applesauce laced with cyanide and then drank a bunch of vodka, put plastic bags on their heads. And half the men in that group were all eunuchs. They all voluntarily got castrated. And then you see their leader, this guy named Applewhite, just this middle-aged, elderly fellow, not too charismatic. And I'm like, man, how did this guy get away with it? How was he able to convince all these folks? Yeah, what would really make your day is if you castrated yourself. That would really help your spiritual life. And furthermore, we're going to join our friends, our alien friends that are hitching a ride on the back of a comic and back of a comet uh, there. And also it was like they were web developers, and at the time web developing was a pretty new type of thing, and they interviewed their clients like, we had no idea they dressed funny, they all had crew cuts, but we didn't know they were a cult. They kept it a secret. And I was thinking, man, what if a cult was so secret that even his own wife didn't know about it? And that's what kind of kicked it off, not so much back in '97, but several years later, I decided, you know what, I'm going to turn this into a TV show, an animated cartoon. And I actually created a pilot, a 26-minute pilot back, I guess it's been 14 years ago now. And I showed that around. And I don't know if you know much about how Hollywood works and all that, but you're pitching it and you find someone. In this case, it was the executive um, producer of the show Adventure Time. I pitched it
Okay.
just,
Yeah.
over, it wasn't Zoom, but something like that. I think the one that Microsoft has. And we pitched it and he clapped. He said, that's great. Send me everything. Let's talk some more. He's like, oh, by the way, where are you guys out of? I was like, we're in Dallas. He's like, are you guys married? Yeah. Do you have kids? One on the way. And he had, my creative partner at the time had 2 stepkids. Then he realized we're not going to twist off, start life anew in New York or California and work for peanuts while we learn the ropes and then pitch our idea. So it quickly soured. We never got a second meeting. And then me and my partner Matt were like, how about this? We spent a lot of time, a lot of money on the pilot. Let's reboot this as a comic. Let's reboot this as a graphic novel. And I was like, Matt, we're getting a little bit older. We've been doing this for a while. We're not as cool as we once were. how about we set it in the 90s? That way we can kind of draw from nostalgia. We can go with our own history. We were kids of the 90s. We graduated in 94, 95. He's like, yeah, that's great. But how about this? We set it in the present day, but then he's telling the story from the mid 90s. And of
Okay.
course,
Yeah.
95 was the year that the internet basically became mainstream. And that is, it's kind of hard to see it while you're in it, but 20 years later, 30 years later, it's like, okay, that was one of the biggest inventions, on the lines of World War II, Columbus, you name it. So that's where we kind of tell the story, and it's two worlds colliding: the old world, the days of payphones and writing things down, to this new world where everything is online and everything moves very fast.
Now, Floyd is the main character, correct? Who are the other characters in the story that also kind of interact with Floyd?
Yeah, for sure. Well, as implied in the title, "Don't Tell My Wife I'm a Cult Leader," he does have a wife. He meets her in the first chapter, and she's an aspiring artist. She's the daughter of a rich guy, has a couple of brothers, and he just has a certain amount of charm, and I don't give a crap what anyone else thinks attitude. And so they hit it off despite him not really having anything to back, to his name. And then it's 11 chapters. So I spend 3 chapters on the 2 of them, and then about 2 to 3 chapters each on 4 of the other characters. And so the first one is a teenage runaway who escaped her own cult. And then I have an ex-con, a white Cajun named Laron. And so he went to prison for a crime he did not commit and learned a lot while in prison. And then we have an ex-Air Force vet who is homeless, has PTSD. He becomes business partners with Floyd. And then finally, I have Dalisholo, or Dali, and he is a South African South African scholar who escaped the early 90s in South Africa, back when they had a lot of violent unrest. He leaves the country to study in the United States. And so the story is about them. And then in the final chapter, you learn how it all comes together, how they all meet, and what's next in store for them. So I do put in there, the subtitle is Book 1. So I definitely plan on having multiple volumes to this saga.
And who's the artist who you're working with, and how did you guys get paired up?
Well, I mentioned my friend Matt, and we were together for many years. He did the all the art for the pilot, and then while we were developing the graphic novel, he just decided life was really too tough. He went through a divorce, so he quit, and he just stopped drawing pretty much altogether professionally. And I was like, all right, I'm kind of stuck out, but I run my own business, as you can tell from my shirt, for people who can see. It's got covered with teddy bears, and I'm a teddy bear designer and wholesaler. And so one of the people I hired to do some art for the website, her name is Jo Diaz, and she is a former Disney animator out of the Philippines. She actually worked on stuff that went, direct to video, like Tarzan 2 and Aladdin 2. I forget all the sequels. So she did that for a while. Then that dried up, and so we worked on a children's book series together that I kind of did for my children. Came up with some stuffed animals for that, sold that for a while. Everyone who got a copy of Stubbs and Stills really enjoyed it. And then she knew I was working on this project and that it went on hiatus, and she was like, well, let me have a stab at it. I'll give you a good page rate, and I'm not really doing anything right now. So it was in the middle of the pandemic, and we started working on it and liked it. And then about a year later, I published the first 3 chapters serially, Lucy's, just like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4 years total, 3 years after that, we put the full volume on Kickstarter.
So is this your first Kickstarter that you've run, or did you do the first 3 chapters as a Kickstarter also?
No, I had my own website, praisefloyd.com, and I put it out there. Was trying to build an audience. It's very hard to break through if you're a nobody with, like that. In the case of Level One, one of your previous podcasts, I forget his name, but it's pretty easy to go from I created Skyrim to I'm now creating a comic book. I know he didn't create it, but he was very heavily involved, had his own audience base. He put out something, I think, a Marvel like a biology book or something like that.
Yeah, the body anatomy of the Marvel universe or
Yeah.
something like that.
So there you go. You have an instant audience that you can market to. There was one about a month ago where the former publishers of G.I. Joe decided to take all of their issues from the 80s and put them into a compendium and charge, 80 or $100 a pop. And yeah, you have at least hundreds of thousands of potential people who'd be willing to explore that side of their nostalgia. So it was kind of hard for me to go from teddy bear salesman to dark comedy graphic novel. Like I have 10,000 subscribers for my my wholesale business, but I'm not about to tell them, oh, by the way, folks, I would probably lose customers and I wouldn't make a single sale. So I knew I set my goal really low. It was my first one. I was like, I spent a lot of time putting together, getting feedback, and I was like, I want to hit the goal. I'm already investing a lot more into the goal of $1,000. I know that I have enough friends who would buy it. There's a few folks that I found along the way when I was selling them serially that became fans, and I was really tickled pink when one of them said, "Hey, when is chapter 10 coming out? I'm waiting over here." I'm like, "Cool." Here's a guy I've never met. Was emailed me out of the blue, wondering where it was. So I was like, "All right, let's do this." And I even, been writing reviews for other authors, letting them know that, hey, I wrote you a review. By the way, take a look at my upcoming project. And Glenn Head was one of those guys who wrote Chatfield Manor, Chicago. He was like, "Oh, this looks great." And my story is similar to his, just a gritty look back at the bygone days. And he wanted me to send him a copy once it was published. So I have that going for me.
I was able to chat with Glenn. I think it was a couple of years ago about Chartwell Manor.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so he seemed to be a pretty cool guy who's been through a lot. And then my ringer who hasn't come in yet is Rainn Wilson, who played Dwight Schrute on The Office. So I'm friends with him. I met his dad in Israel, and he introduced me to him, and I've been going back and forth. Every time I go to LA, I try to see him. And he's interviewed me for a podcast about prison work. Not that I was in a prison, but volunteering with prisoners and stuff. So I wrote him, but I don't ask him to do anything. I think that's why I've been friends with him so long. I don't say, "Hey, do this for me," So I sent him the email, sent him a text. Haven't heard back yet. Sometimes he'll write back right away. Sometimes he'll write back a week later. But if he doesn't, that's cool too. When I showed him the original project, Rainn, he's like, "Hey man, I don't like cartoons at all. I don't like The Simpsons. I don't like Family Guy." So it's all I can say is, best of luck to you. The characters seem fine. The story seems fine, but it's not for me. I'm not really going to go to bat for you, kind of thing. So I don't know how much he's changed his tune over the years, but we've become better friends. So I think he would throw me a bone and send out a tweet if it came down to it.
So, what, if any, challenges did you when you were taking the original idea from the animated series idea and transferring it to the graphics novel page?
Yeah.
Were there any challenges, or did you anything that you found to be that maybe didn't translate as well?
Oh yeah, well for sure the animated pilot was a proof of concept where I didn't do the backstory. I just kind of did a scene that I thought people would like. And I had a fleshed out story and all that, but when you're writing an 384 pages, you can tell a lot more stories. So I needed to come up with more stories, more fleshed out characters. But I would say the biggest challenge for me is that you write the script, You try your best to say, okay, page 1 will have 6 frames, frame 1 will do this. But then when I start laying it out on the page, because I'm not sure how much of it's going to fit, and my artist is not a graphic novel artist, so she wouldn't really know about what would work, what wouldn't work. And I was like, okay, this has way too many words, way too many pages. I need to cut this down without changing what it is I'm trying to convey. So
Hmm.
graphic novels really forces you to be less wordy, let the pictures say what you're trying to say, and only have enough words to where when you look at a page, you're not turned off by the amount of words on the page. And it really helped me become more concise as a writer, and I think a lot better because you're able to get through the story a lot quicker than, say, if I wrote just a traditional novel or something like that.
Hmm. So, um, this being your first experience with Kickstarter, what is your? I mean, it's been live what, a couple days now as we speak.
That's right, about 4 days.
And so what in the 4 days? What is your I guess first impressions of the kickstarting method or the process?
Well, everyone will tell you have an audience first, then sell. But if it is a chicken and egg, it's like, well, in order to have an audience, you need to have something. So, and I did try advertising my serialized ones, but I'm like, okay, I'm trying to sell a $5 floppy. How much am I going to spend to make that one $5 sale, hoping that they'll like it enough to buy a second one when I email them? So I was like, all right, let me just try my best, add a few followers here, give out the first chapters for free, and let's advertise a little bit, trying to get people to be notified when the story goes live. And I got up to about 20 or 30 folks. I'm like, all right, let's do this. Let's start August 1st and see what happens. And I was really surprised where right away, like the first time I checked, I had 3 pledges, and 2 of them I didn't know. One of them I knew just on Facebook. And
Hmm.
then as soon as I announced it, people started buying. And then one friend even got the top tier, which was to be written into the story. And I was able to get my first goal, hit my goal right away. And I did a little bit of advertising on X, where they have a new method of um, advertising where they just pay for click through, which is great. So you're not paying for per impression or if they're liking it or something like that. So I'm like, all right, that's great, because if they're clicking through, they're definitely interested. And I just set I think the rate at the lowest was $1, and I targeted 200 keywords, all related to Kickstarters and graphic novels and TV shows that are similar to what I'm trying to do. And I don't think I've gotten any sales from that. I have to check that more closely, but about 60 or 70 click throughs. And then a few people do like the actual ad, they'll tap like. And I'm like, all right, what kind of people is this? And so the first one was a gender fluid bloke who identifies as a blue dragon and who was worried that Project 25 would ban porn. I'm like, okay, single issue voter here. And then there was another guy who seemed, he had a pretty innocuous profile, but his tweets seemed to be pointing out all of the crypto Jews in Congress, and here's who to watch out for. I'm like, all right. So I got the 2 extremes. I got the left wing and the right wing. Maybe there's some folks in the middle. And my question to them, if I was going to send them a message, hey, are you going to buy my book? That's all I really care about.
Yeah.
I don't care about who you are or what you believe. If you like my book, that's where we can end the relationship, and let me know what you think. So I did make uh, the Kickstarter longer than usual, because this week I plan on trying to do some advertising on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll just see what happens. I don't know how many people have said save it for when it's ending, because that's what I
Hmm.
often do. If I see I'm not going to buy it right away, but let me know when there's 2 days left. So we'll see
Right.
what happens at the end. And in the meantime, I've just been letting other creators know, especially the ones that I've backed, that hey, I got this thing going, and let me know what you think. I never really ask people, please buy my book or anything like that. It's pretty obvious what I'm trying to do when I
Right.
send stuff. So far so
So
good. Hmm.
yeah, I mean, you've met your goal, and it looks like you're headed for some stretch goals.
Yes, I wasn't planning. I think the only stretch goal I'll do is I found a really good. The the book is already at the printer, so I'm getting
Hmm.
900 books printed overseas, and I'm like, all right. The worst that can happen is that I sell more than 900 books, which seems very unlikely in 30 days. But that'd be the kind of problem I'd want to have. Hey guys, you're going to have to print more books. I sold too many. So that's coming. That should be in a few months. I'm going to get a few flown to me just so I can have them. And then after that, I'm just going to go do tables and set up shop wherever anyone might be, and then just do traditional advertising and just see what happens. And see if you can. I do have some other friends in Hollywood that said next time you're out here and you have your book in your hot little hand, I'll introduce you people that not only publish comic books but try to get them optioned
Hmm.
for TV shows and the like, because that's where the real money comes in and the real notoriety. And of course, once you have a TV show, the graphic novel will become more popular and vice versa.
Right.
But that's always in the cards. And the people who do read it say, I could see this as an animated series. I was like, well, yeah, there's a reason for that. It started off as one. And I figure most people
Well,
go the other way around. They go from graphic novel to animated series, not
yeah.
so much animated show to graphic novel.
Well, let's play, best case scenario, and it does get picked up for an animated, series. Who would you, who do you see voicing your characters?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it that much because
Yeah,
the
I know
main re-
it's
yeah, the main
you
reason is that
don't want to get the hopes up, right?
no, it's more about thinking about theme music, what music I'd play,
Hmm.
because you can't play music on graphic novels just yet. You can't even print the lyrics. Like I found out that I do paraphrase a few lyrics from The Doors, but
Hmm.
you can't use lyrics without express written permission and probably a lot of money. But I did find a comedian online who's sort of a frantic type guy. I think there was a video. Oh, it was after October 7th happened in Israel, and he was portraying himself as a celebrity who wasn't sure what side he should pick. It was
Hmm.
clear that he didn't have any principles. He just wanted to go with the one that was right. And so he was like, well, let's see, the Palestinian people, they seem to be allied with the LGBTQ. They're usually right about things, but gosh, man, what am I going to do? And it's funny because it's probably what a lot of celebrities are doing. Do I support Israel? I got to say
Hmm.
something? So he was making hay out of that. And I was like, okay, if it ever, he'll be the first guy I call as far as that goes. Um, but other than that, my main thing is I don't want my graphic novel just to be a pitch book
Right.
for the animated series. I wanted to make something really good in and of itself. And whether I'm the only one who reads it or just a few others, I kind of liken it to a guy who is building a train set in his basement where he goes down, he adds a few things, he buys some miniature cows, he makes a little farm. He goes down, he just really enjoys it. And then the people who come down to take a look, they're impressed, but he's not trying to sell them on anything. He's just doing it for
Hmm.
himself. So I'm my biggest fan. I really enjoy it. I really like how it turned out. And that, of course, helps me trying to let other people know about it. And I do think that the story does have a lot of um, obviously a lot of philosophical points that I try to make. People from time to time, because I've studied so much on different political ideologies and histories and religions, that you should write some kind of book. And knowing Rainn Wilson has published 3 or 4 books, and he has to work really hard to uh, get the word out, despite him being an enormous celebrity. I knew that no one would buy my book if I'm just writing a nonfiction book, but I can take everything that I know and shoehorn it into a dark comedy that
Hmm.
people may be willing to read.
So, what reward levels are you offering? For people who want to support this project.
I wanted to keep it very basic. I tend to go all in sometimes, and I always regret it, whether it's at work or whatever. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to have the PDF, the PDF expanded edition with my annotation, I'm going to have a beautiful hardcover book. And then if people want to buy some glossies, I have a fancy printer at the office. I'll print some glossies, I'll sign them. And if you want to be written into the show, or if you want your likeness drawn, stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have to produce or stock until it gets sold, that's what I was kind of sticking with. I didn't want to have a bunch of pins that I have to buy and a bunch of trading cards, this kind of thing. So I kept it pretty simple. Like I said, I may have a secret level up where I gild the edges of the book in gold if I sold enough, but that does add like almost $2 per book at the level at the number of books I was buying. But the bookmark was very cheap, so we are definitely putting a bookmark in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I know we've talked about, different, comic writers like Glenn Head. Who are your inspirations, when it comes to, your writing,
Yeah.
be it
So,
comic book or anything?
oh, for sure. So every title page, I basically take a still from a movie or a work of art or something that I found inspirational. So, for instance, the cover, if you're a fan of African American history, you might recognize Malcolm X peering out through his curtains, but instead of a tiki torch that Floyd is holding, Malcolm X is holding an assault rifle. And his pensive look on his face, like he's protecting his family, he's looking out. That I kind of use that to inspire me. But if you remember, before memes, before the internet, how did dudes talk? What did they talk about? Was it sports? Was it the weather? And I remember through the 90s, high school, college, it was just an endless stream of movie quotes,
Hmm.
right? So Dazed and Confused, Pulp Fiction, Ferris Bueller, The Goonies, Neverending Story, Princess Bride. So I work that not just into the dialogue, which is limited, but into the storylines. So as you're reading it, you're like, this is kind of reminding me of Pulp Fiction in a little bit, or hey, did that line come out of um, Ferris Bueller's? That art looks a lot like Andy Warhol. So it's all there, but it's not in your face. You have to sort of think about it or be a really big fan to get an
Hmm.
idea. But Quentin Tarantino and the Coen brothers are my two biggest influences. I love not so much the superfluous violence, but I love Tarantino's style. If you take all the violence out, which is what he's known for, it's his unique way of storytelling and dialogue and scenes that really didn't need to be there. It didn't really further the plot, but without them, it wouldn't be as good of a movie. And I think his latest movie, I think it's still his latest, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's just a bunch of non sequiturs pasted together, but somehow it just makes for a really satisfying movie. And then the Coen brothers, it's almost absurd to the point where it's like science fiction, but not quite. These quirky characters and quirky storylines and these zany plot twists. So I try to really work that into it. But as far as the art and the story, I guess I was trying to channel Persepolis. That was that, I think it was Marianne Serapi. I can't remember how to pronounce her name.
Yeah.
She was like, all right, I'm going to tell this story, and it's black and white, and most of the characters are covered up from head to toe in hijab, so it's pretty easy to draw. And I was like, all right, you don't need to be the world's best artist in order to convey a story. I'm not going to try to win any art awards. So I told my artist, hey, forget about the shading, forget about really plussing up the color. Just make it basic, almost like something out of the 90s where it's simple, like adult cartoons from the day, uh,
Hmm.
like The Simpsons. It was just very basic. The reason why he drew all the characters yellow, this might be urban legend, was that as you're flipping through the channels, if you saw yellow people on TV, you might stop and watch, right? But other than that, there was nothing stupendous about the art, but then it became its own art style as it became more popular. So that's what I was going with. The art is clean, it's professional, it conveys what it needs to convey. And that's essentially it. And I just kind of put all the chips on the story, and was really trying to come up with a very interesting story. I hired a comics coach named Chris Staros. He's the CEO of Top Shelf
Yep.
Productions, and he solicited. He's like, "Hey, I moonlight as a comic editor. If you don't need someone full time, I can take a few chapters and give you my professional input." And so I've been doing that. So every 3 or 4 chapters I write, I give it to him, and he's able to see things that I may not see, and makes it a lot better. So I really enjoy that. And he actually gave me proofreaders to call to get it proofread, and a list of folks that might be interested in doing podcasts. And I think you were on that list. So thank you, Chris,
Nice.
if you're listening. I already thanked
Yes,
him.
thank you, Chris.
Yeah. So that would be it, mostly from the movies, and also TV shows like The Wire, Breaking Bad, Sopranos, where you have character arcs. Good guys become bad, bad guys become good, normal guys just become dead at certain point, and trying just to put a lot of up the stakes whenever I can. I think that's very important. I don't think you can just, like, I start off right in the middle of a standoff, as opposed to, let's see how he's going. Oh, now he's in a standoff. It's like,
Yep.
let's just start it right in a standoff, so you know right away that the stakes are high, and what can we do to make the stakes higher, and then the stakes become higher at the last page of book one, that from the people who have read it all the way through, which is very few because the book's not released, are like, okay, yeah, this makes me want to know more, despite not much being said. And I kind of feel like when you watch Better Call Saul, we know how it ends, but are you really going to take 6 or 7 seasons to tell us how this one character became the lawyer? It was like 4 or 5 seasons before he even went from Jimmy to Saul. So I'm okay with slow burn storytelling.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up here, one question. Uh, let's say you are a cult leader. You're hauled up in your house, surrounded by the federal government. Um, what are, let's say, 3 songs that you hope they don't play to get you to leave?
I would say let's gosh, well, if they put it on repeat, that's one thing. And if we
Yes.
take off the heavy metal and the lamb slaughtering screeches, if we're not counting that, my guess would be, gosh, anything like early Green Day, even though that came about when I was growing up. Like the movie soundtrack that I was in my head as I was writing this, it was from the 90s, but nothing mainstream, mostly from the Manchester, like the Happy Mondays and the Soup Dragons and Spiral Carpets, Morrissey, a lot of big, Chemical Brothers and things like that. So Ace of Base is another one that I just felt was super popular, hated it, couldn't stand it. So that would be number 2. And then number 3, I'd have to think about it for a minute. 9 Inch Nails used to be one of my favorite bands, but then that last album that he put out during the pandemic, it was literally just sounds, no words, and it was 2 albums full of that. So if the feds wanted to be ironic and drive me crazy, it wouldn't be that it was bad. It would just be like, oh, Trent Reznor, what have you become? You've turned into a new age nobody. Man, I
Well,
saw you.
you win an Oscar, and things you get less angry and
I know. I told my mom. She didn't. I wore a 9 Inch Nails shirt like every day in high school, just about. And I went to these small venues where he played and blew out my eardrums. And she just was happy that I liked something. I wasn't really like a guy with a lot of hobbies in high school. But to see that he had all that, this fiery singer, mosh pits, to, yes, winning an Oscar. I remember telling my mom, it's like, can you believe the guy from 9 Inch Nails won an Oscar for a soundtrack? And it was pretty nice. It was pretty nice as far as soundtracks though. And then he was like, yeah, you know what? I'm wealthy now. I don't have to bust my butt. I'm just going to put out this album and see if people play it. Same thing with Pink Floyd, where they put out, it wasn't really Pink Floyd, but David Gilmour put out an album of outtakes from Division Bell a few years ago. It became a bestseller. And it's nice, but also annoyed that he couldn't get the band back together and put out something original.
Yeah. All right. As we wrap up, anything else you wanted to mention about the book, or that we maybe didn't talk about? I know we talked about a lot. Or if you want to give one final pitch for the book and where people can find you on social media.
Yeah, I would say the main pitch is that it's finished. It's not a work in progress. It's 384 pages, full color, hardcover, really great price, only $35 if all you want is the book. Hard to beat that. Usually books of that size are going for 50. I make money to make comics. I don't make comics to make money. And I was able to get in enough books to where I can put it out for that price. And I think if you do read it and you like those kind of books where it's not a superhero book, it's not fantasy, or anything like that, I think you'll really enjoy it, especially if you're from the Gen X. If you're a Gen Xer or a 90s kid or one of their proteges, I think you'll really enjoy it. The fact that it takes place 30 years ago put me in a spot in 1985 when I was watching Back to the Future. And of course, Back to the Future took place 30 years prior to that. And I remember going to the theater with my mom and dad, and they were pointing out all the stuff that they don't have anymore. So I try to do that here, where writing down directions on how to get somewhere,
Yes.
answering a payphone, not having enough quarters to make the call. What am I going to do? Leaving messages on the answering machine, going to Blockbusters to buy a video. So I try to throw that all in there to show what life was like back in simpler times. And yeah, so it's there through the month. I think if you buy it, and you read it, I think you'll really enjoy it. I wouldn't put it out if I thought I was just trying to make my money back for my investment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting it out because I really enjoy it. I have no plans. My goal is not to make my money back. My goal is to build up a fan base to where when I do book 2, I can be like some of these others where you have a built-in fan base ready for more. So that would be my goal, would be to day 1, 100 buyers all trying to become first, trying to bid up on that very special limited pledge that they just couldn't get their hands on. So there you go. But yeah, you can, if you can remember praisefloyd.com, you can follow the link there to the Kickstarter, or hopefully you'll put this in the notes.
Yes, I will.
And just search for it then. Search for it there.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time today to chat, and we'll include this in our weekly crowdfunding roundup, which gets posted to Comic Watch every Saturday at noon Eastern. And we'll continue to follow the progress of the campaign as it continues. And next time, when you're ready to do book 2 or have anything else that you'd like to share, you're more than welcome to come back and chat about that. Or if you just want to chat about comics, or we can, we're pretty much the same age, so we could probably talk about for hours about the 90s.
Oh, right on. You look much younger than me. You must take good care of yourself.
No, you graduated in '94. I graduated high school in '96. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would have put you down. Yeah, like late 30s. That's what I would have put you down for.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe it's the filter. Maybe it's the cam filter.
Yeah. Yes, I have the de-age me and hide my gray hairs.
Yeah, right on. All right.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much, and we'll get this up as soon as possible. And good luck for the rest of the campaign.
Okay. Thanks, Chad.
All right. Keep in touch.
Sure.